ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is James, joined as ever by my good friend Steve, and welcome to another episode in our Halloween Spooktacular. This episode, we are talking the 1977 Japanese horror movie, House.
James, I can't believe you got me. Well, first, before I even go into the film, I have to explain, I've just come from work, tie is on. You wanted me to take the tie off, but I thought our viewers needed to see if I'm going to drink very nice scotch, I should be dolled up. I should have that look. I should have that, executive power broker.
It's like executive casual. That top button is undone. It's been a long working day.
It has been. And now I deserve a little bit of a scotch now.
So yes, I asked you to watch Nobuhiko Obayashi.
I'm going to let you pronounce it.
It is Nobuhiko Obayashi's House, which is an anomaly. Mm-hmm. It's a one-of-a-kind unicorn of a movie that I just thought you needed in your life.
And I'm so glad you did, because I got third of the way into this, and I was loving it because you'd kind of kind of set me up that this is going to be campy. This is going to be a little bit, don't take it face value. And I just love the fact that this movie has no boundaries. Like there was just, it was camp, it was horror, it was comedy, it was just a screwball of all kinds of genres mashed together with a facade that this is a horror film. And throw in some really bad animation that was intended to be really bad animation. And I gotta say, this film was, I'm so glad you introduced it to me, because
great.
It was, yeah.
Well, that makes me very, very happy. I mean, it's just to set it up very, very briefly. If you don't know, it's essentially the story of a group of 7 high school girls who are all like great friends, and it's a summer holiday, and they go off to stay in the countryside at one of their aunts' houses. And as soon as they get there, pretty much, it all gets pretty weird. The house is haunted and proceeds to kind of turn on them, essentially. And the tone of it. Yeah, and the tone of it is completely sort of almost uncategorizable. It feels like a sort of a live action cartoon in many ways.
Would you call it camp? Would you say it is campy?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's intentionally silly and weird, and like you said, I don't think the effects are supposed to be intentionally bad so much as intentionally unrealistic. There's a lot of sort of hand drawn tactile special effects of like sort of ghosts and what have you. There's a lot of stop motion animation, a lot of rear screen projection, all kinds of like different, now very outdated effects work sort of going on.
Right.
And the tone of it is sort of playful and light. It starts off like a sort of a kid's, it's kids going on a summer holiday. The girls are kind of more wholesome than is humanly possible. I think, they are cuter than cute. They've all got these like silly little nicknames for each other. So they're almost like sort of the 7 dwarfs skipping off into the forest. I was trying to think of a good way of describing what this movie is. And it's almost like a Hayao Miyazaki movie, like Spirited Away or My Neighbor Totoro or something like that, done live action crossed with a Scooby-Doo movie.
Right.
It's kind of something like that. And also it reminds me of something like a Monkeys movie. Did you ever watch Head? There are moments, particularly towards the beginning, there's some very strange slapsticky stuff with the teachers, falling down the street and things like that. And I was like, okay, it kind of almost feels like the Monkeys or something like that. It's a little bit of everything. It's a complete kind of smorgasbord, hodgepodge, but there is definitely somewhere in there a very steady authorial hand. Somebody behind the camera knows exactly what they want, and that's Nobuhiko Obayashi.
Yeah. A couple points on what you said. I'm glad you brought up the Monkeys, because even though it's the 70s, I was thinking the old Batman series level of camp, where it was intended to be a little bit silly. It was intended to be very unrealistic. I'm glad you corrected me. I didn't mean to sound like the special effects were bad. You're right. They're meant to be intentionally unrealistic, is a better way of stating that. But the monkeys, there was kind of a genre theme in the 60s where you could do some outlandish experimental things in film and TV, that there was certain boundaries being pushed. And you could see in this film, the unrealism was meant to be front and center, that it was intentionally pushing some themes and boundaries and expectations of the movie-going audience. And it did harken back to a lot of that 60s Monkeys and Batman, where it's a lot of spectral colors and really wild things occur for no apparent reason, and things are very spectacular and outlandish and over the top in a way that, well, makes it campy.
Very much so. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the color palette is incredibly sort of bright and lurid throughout. I mean, there's that whole opening sequence at Gorgeous, who's ostensibly kind of the main character. It's Gorgeous's aunt's house, I think, that they
love the name. Yeah.
And oh wait, is it her house? Because she's the one who was supposed to. It starts and she's supposed to be going on summer holiday with her dad. Right. And her dad is a famous film composer who's just come back from Italy. And there's this great throwaway line where he's like, Leone says my music's better than Morricone's. And you're like, okay, that's funny. And then he ditches her essentially to because he's just got married, or he's got a new girlfriend. And so she agrees to go with the other girls to Auntie's house. But I
thought it was a little melodramatic right at the beginning. I thought there was just such a level of melodrama there that I thought, where's the horror in this? But obviously I judged a little too quick.
You jump the gun. It does take a little bit of build up. But that whole sequence where she's going home and she's having that conversation with her dad out on the balcony or in the garden is all shot from inside the house through the window. And behind them is this sort of crazy Technicolor sort of sunset, just sort of backdrop, which is, obviously never trying to be realistic in any way. But it's kind of like a fairy tale almost, or something. And then you're introduced immediately to this woman who, is she like the evil stepmother, or what's her role going to be in this? So, it definitely has sort of, fairy tales in its DNA as much as horror movies. I mean, this is a movie in which a piano eats a teenage girl, but at the same time, it's kind of incredibly sweet and wholesome, even while all of this is going on.
It eats her fingers initially, her digits, and then eats her. And it brings up a good point, because as I was kind of doing a little background reading on this, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the writer-director, but he got ideas from his preteen daughter. Like, what are the things that scare you? What are, and it's this preteen daughters, being caught in a grandfather clock, having food being eaten by a massive futon beds. When I play piano, I'd always feel like my fingers were hurting, like it was eating my fingers. And how he was able to turn these very real horror scares of a preteen girl and bring them to film in a really macabre. It's both macabre and comical at the same time.
Right. Yeah, it's incredibly sort of rich. It does feel like, I mean, if you think of many sort of classic fairy tales or whatever, there is a real sort of gothic element to them. A lot of those are really scary. There's castles and forests and witches and stepmothers and evil queens and dreams and nightmares, all of this stuff going on. And so it feels like he's not ripping off, but ripping from all of that kind of idea. It is fascinating that his daughter Chigumi gave him a lot of the ideas. Not to name drop too much, but I have met Nobuhiko Obayashi and his daughter Chigumi Obayashi.
Pray tell.
At a film festival about 10 years ago. Nobuhiko is sadly no longer with us. He passed away in 2020. very very old guy, but still very groovy, kind of like long hair and I remember he had lots of different kind of like rings, big sort of punk rock rings on all of his fingers, and he was still making movies. He had a bit of a kind of renaissance in the last decade, and I think a lot of that renaissance was due to the sort of rediscovery of this movie, because although it was kind of quite popular, quite surprisingly popular when it came out, it then sort of disappeared. And it was about sort of 15 years ago when a couple of labels, Eureka in the UK and then Criterion in the US, sort of found it, restored it, and brought it back, and a whole new generation just went, oh, and just flipped out over it and just went, oh, this is like the ultimate sort of cult classic movie. And I think he had been very prolific in sort of the 80s. He'd made a lot of movies, but often kind of quite mainstream sort of teenage adventure kind of movies. I remember seeing one called I Are You, You Am Me, about a teenage boy and a teenage girl who body swap. And there's some, it's at a temple or something, and they fall over, or, there's a magic spell, and they swap bodies. And because it's kind of a slightly sort of off-kilter Japanese movie, the teenage boy now in the body of the teenage girl does spend a lot of the movie just looking at his boobs and playing with them. but it's very much focused from the girl's point of view, and it's kind of fun adventure.
Haven't we all thought about that?
Well, yes, I think the truth is yes, and that he was bold enough to acknowledge it in a kind of mainstream movie for kids and be like, well, that's what I would do. This is what a teenage boy would do, probably.
Absolutely.
But yeah, he had a kind of renaissance and was making by that stage a lot more serious, thoughtful movies. He was obviously very hung up with the end of World War II and the nuclear, the atom bombs and what have you. And a lot of his later movies do revisit that period of history, and it's even acknowledged in House. There's a sort of a fleeting message. It's something that whether he was actually alive at the time or whether it's something that he recalls from his childhood, I'm not too sure. Suffice to say that I was at a film festival in Japan in 2012, and he was there premiering his new movie. And his daughter is now like his right hand.
Personal assistant.
I guess she was probably around the same age as me, a bit older. And but she was there, helping him do everything and all the rest of it. We became Facebook friends, and I just checked before we recorded the show. Yes, I am Facebook friends with Chigumi Obayashi. And I think actually that might be how I found out that he had passed away a couple of years ago. I think she had posted about it first. But yeah, very nice people. I interviewed him for the publication I was writing about, and obviously we talked about House quite a lot. But he was very much still a very sort of on the ball, very passionate counterculture filmmaker who had all of these great sort of stories to tell about his old contemporaries. He'd lost none of his verve right until the end.
What I thought was interesting was, I had just recently watched, and I'm probably the last person to watch this, is The Cabin in the Woods, the Joss Whedon film. And it highlights, obviously, the traditional roles that every teen slasher film has. The athlete, the ingenue, the whore, the klutz. And it was interesting that when I saw House, although a lot of these templates hadn't been kind of run to exhaustion to the point where they're being parodied as Joss Whedon did. And even in 1977, you're starting to see these girls all go there, and they all kind of have, to lesser or greater extents, these roles. You've got kung fu, you've got the athletic person, you've got the klutz, you've got gorgeous. There's these certain roles that are almost become mandatory in any teen slasher film. And it was almost like it was groundbreaking for 1977.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how much it kind of leans into that. You've got Prof, who has glasses and is the smart one.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And Melody, I think, is the one who plays the piano. and fantasy is the one who daydreams all the time. So they're these very kind of like on the nose archetypal sort of nicknames, but it works brilliantly.
Archetypal, that was the word I was looking for, actually. Okay. Well done.
Excellent. And sadly they all come to a pretty sticky end. I don't remember there being a great deal of sort of blood and gore in this movie, but they all essentially get eaten by the house itself, because the house is sort of the embodiment of the auntie, and the auntie has been as you find out at the end of the film, she has been waiting for her lover to return from World War II, and obviously it's now decades later. And so any young woman who comes to the house, she sort of is eaten in order for her to maintain her youthful vigor, I think.
Yes. And I thought the auntie, the woman who played the role, was quite good. I mean, she was really, when she kind of like sticks things in her mouth and like things that she almost had been inferred that she'd been eating.
She has an eyeball in her mouth at one point.
That's it. Yeah. Here's the problem, James. I'm going to confess to our viewers. I watched this like 6 weeks ago, and so I'm having to. We watched it, so I remember that moment, but I couldn't remember exactly what was in her mouth. You're right; it was an eyeball.
That's right. Yeah, she's and the eyeball's still kind of like moving around.
Yes, yeah. And then she kind of pops it in. It was like,
well, that's what I like about it. There's such a sort of knowing sense of humor to everything.
Yes.
It's not taking itself seriously. It understands how kind of ridiculous it is, but it's going all in a way that you don't really see films do.
And who doesn't want to see a watermelon that's been cooling in the local water well be replaced with a friend's head, or to see a piano eat the digits and then eat the piano player, or to see the light fixture eat a woman? It's just a fun ride. Who doesn't want to see those things?
Yeah, no, it is. And it's completely sort of unique. It's a film that sort of seems to exist in and of itself. It's not even like, I mean, because it was successful, but it's not like it then inspired a whole load of sort of knockoffs and there became a sort of subgenre of these kind of things. It seems to sort of exist in a bubble on its own and has never been replicated or diminished by time or anything like that. I mean, I've seen it a few times now, but I watched it just again yesterday just to refresh my memory. And I was like, wow, this still is just really, really good. It's so odd, so weird.
Well, and the interesting point is, with the intention of making the special effects unrealistic, it's really made it timeless.
Yeah.
Because now we can look back at it, and it's not like you're looking at it going, oh, these are really bad special effects. You're looking at it through a different lens of, even the director at the time was intentionally using these special effects in a way that ultimately makes it a timeless film.
Well, it almost feels like a sort of a school production in a way, like a school play.
Yes.
There is a touch of sort of the Wes Anderson to it. You know how he does those, particularly in his early films, and before it became his entire aesthetic. He did these kind of school productions of Serpico, and then he did a few more for the MTV Awards. Where it's deliberately kind of hokey and deliberately kind of sort of artificial. It was like a doll's house kind of thing, and you feel that here. There's a tactility and a practicality to these effects that you can see how they were made. You're like, oh, okay, I see how you did that. And you're right, that does stop it from aging. I mean, nothing dates like CGI, for example.
Oh God, you watch a movie in the 90s and it's horrific. You watch CGI in the 90s, watch like Lost in Space with William Hurt.
Of all the films you could have cited. Yeah,
it's funny because that one really sticks in my mind, because even watching it at the time, I remember thinking, this CGI is going to look so bad in 20 years. Because I know, because it looks bad now.
Anything else you'd like to bring up?
I think I'm good.
Me too. I mean, it is what it is. It's impossible really to put into words, and that's kind of part of the appeal. That's what's so great about it. And if you haven't seen it, I mean, if you have seen it, then you know what we're talking about, and hopefully you loved it as much as we did. If you haven't seen it, just go and watch it. I mean, it's out there. The great thing is it's incredibly easy to find now. It, like I said, it's on Masters of Cinema in the UK, it's on Criterion in the US, so it's on Criterion Channel. So you can find it, and it is just it's like nothing else, but it's just a lot of fun. It's like a lean 90 minutes. I think it's even less than 90 minutes. And it's just wacky and weird and wonderful, I think.
It's a roller coaster ride. Put your hands up, enjoy it, feel the wind in your face.
It's a fun house. It's a total fun house movie.
That's it. It's a fun house movie. Go and enjoy.
You ought to be in pictures, oh, what a hit you would be. Your voice